It is the new year of 1706, and while Western Europe is consumed completely by its War of the Spanish Succession, armies raging on fronts as far apart as Catalonia, Flanders, the Rhine, and Lombardy, the eastern empires and kingdoms of the continent are similarly aflame in a great northern war, drawing men from the halls of Warsaw to the wastes of Siberia. Sweden under its martial king Charles XII remains the predominant power of the region, but it is now challenged by the upstart realm of Peter I Russia, a force that Charles has already trounced in battles like that of Narva 5 years ago. Now, Charles looks with growing resentment at the new settlement Peter has built on the former Swedish colony at the mouth of the Neva River. The blowhard Tsar has even had the temerity to give this ramshackle shanty town his own name, St. Petersburg. But with both Warsaw and Krakow back under rightful Swedish helm, the King of Sweden intends to run the Tsar back to Moscow, and with this objective in mind, he sets his army toward the main Russian force in the town of Grodno in the very first days of the year. Losing thousands of men to frostbite means little if it brings total victory, and within a fortnight, Charles has crossed the Neman, and 2 days later he has trapped a combined Russian-Saxon army of 40,000 men in the town. With Sweden still boasting military superiority over all contenders, the situation looks bleak for the Tsar. If you enjoy the strategic depth of historical battles, you're going to love this game, Raid Shadow Legends. Stick around till the end to find out how to get an exclusive bonus. Raid has an endless amount of content, and they keep adding new updates all the time. The PvE mode is incredibly advanced, and I love the strategy of building the perfect team of champions to take down different bosses. The AAA graphics are amazing, and since it's cross-platform, you can play on mobile or PC. Now is the absolute best time to start playing. Raid is giving away 2 free legendary champions and a strong epic to give you a massive head start. You can scan my QR code or follow the link in the description to get started. First, you'll get the legendary Elenaril, who is perfect for destroying PvE bosses with her massive poison explosions. Then at level 15, you unlock Ultimate Galek, an epic orc whose AoE HP burn is essential for the Spider Dungeon. Plus, new players get a second legendary champion by using one of 4 promo codes. BIGDAWG for Turvold, GETALICE for Alice the Wanderer, KITTYCUT for Cheshire Cat, or GOFAST for Razzlevarg. I highly recommend BIGDAWG, as Turvold deals devastating single target damage. You only get these free champions if you download Raid using my link in the description or by scanning the QR code on screen within 48 hours after downloading with my link. Seize the moment. Now is the best time to start playing Raid. As Charles closes in on Grodno, his opponent, Augustus of Saxony, the elected king of Poland-Lithuania, moves away from the town at speed to avoid capture. It was Augustus, along with Peter of Russia and Frederick of Denmark-Norway, who believed that together they would overwhelm the teenaged Swedish king on his accession 9 years ago. But so far the last half-decade has brought naught save invariable defeat and humiliation at Charles's hands. In fact, though Augustus still holds the traditionally Protestant throne of Saxony, the Polish kingship for which he renounced his faith is now in the hands of Stanislav Leszczyński, Charles's appointee. While Peter gives orders for his general Alexander Menshikov to similarly retreat from the Swedish onslaught at Grodno, Augustus ruminates on his failures on the cold winter roads back to the west. The situation is not a total loss to the coalition. Augustus left Grodno at the head of 5,000 troops, and he manages to collect 2,000 more on his march west. Another far larger army is advancing from Saxony itself. This 20,000-strong force is commanded by Johann Matthias von der Schulenburg, a Prussian by birth, and an able soldier who has served the Empire by fighting the Ottomans in the Balkans, as well as fighting in the armies of both Brunswick and Savoy. Now pledging his sword to the Saxons, he is expected to march east, link up with the king, and then continue until they destroy the host of the Swedish monarch, and thus carry this long conflict to an end. One obstacle stands in Schulenburg and Augustus's path to this end, and it is the Swedish army of Carl Gustaf Renskold, a force of just 10,000 men, stationed to police central Poland. Augustus gives order for Schulenburg to march his army in late January from his rendezvous point at Sorau in the northeast of Saxony. In Saxony itself, having its elector elevated to the throne of Poland, and the subsequent opposition to his rule, has brought rather unprecedented demands to bear on the small state. An active minor player in many of the great conflicts of early modern Europe, Saxony now finds itself with a head of government that is required to play a role as one of the premier continental monarchs. As such, the support he extracts from it to further his ambitions has placed tremendous strain on the economy and population. While the city of Dresden has a population of perhaps about 30,000, Augustus has spent the preceding years rebuilding the Saxon army to a figure even greater than that, and now Schulenburg is leading a force of 16,000 infantry in 3 corps and 4,000 cavalry and dragoons in 2 separate companies. There are also many thousands of civilian camp followers trailing in its wake. In blunt numbers, Schulenburg's is a formidable force, but any man with a keen eye watching it on the march will notice certain questionable aspects. While veteran Saxons still form a strong component within its ranks, a not insignificant number of these men are green recruits, press-ganged into service. Perhaps a larger block is formed of Germans from other states, like Bavaria and Thuringia, as well as Austrians and Swiss, along with disparate French, English, Dutch, and Bohemian servicemen. Fully 6,000 of Schulenburg's host are Russian foot soldiers on loan, and their quality in both leadership and operations is under serious doubt. Schulenburg himself has voiced public reservations on many occasions about the real strength of the Saxon forces, but like Augustus and most other public voices, the sheer numerical advantage afforded by the Swedish king's absence to the east has filled him with confidence. The Saxon army also has 32 good field artillery pieces for its campaign, including a half-dozen 6-pounder guns, the noise of which breaks through any lingual divide amidst the regiments. By the last day of January, after a hasty and somewhat disorganized march, Schulenburg's army has crossed the Oder and is resting at Boyadell. All of his intelligence and scouting parties inform him that Renskold and his weak garrison force is retreating at pace. Corresponding with Augustus, Schulenburg promises his monarch that he will not let the Swede make an escape. With this in mind, he sends out a strong scouting party numbering 500 men to locate the Swedish host, and it fans out in the Brenno and Ilgen areas. While reconnoitering this territory, the Saxon commander Alexander Dietrich von Eichstätt hears reports that the Swedes are not in fact moving away from the Saxon army, but are in fact marching toward it. He sends word of this to a dubious Schulenburg, who is moving the main host to Schlava, but the general orders him to continue forward. Eichstätt thus is met and charged by an aggressive detachment of Wallachians fighting under the Swedish banner as he rides to investigate reports of enemy movement near a sandbank and nearby marsh. Extricating himself after a sharp action, he gallops back to report to Schulenburg. The Saxon commander does not know it yet, but the Swedes have in fact spent the past days moving from Posen to Lissa and then on to Schwetzkau, finally settling on a position outside the settlement of Weigmannsdorf. Its commander Renskold has made it his business throughout this march to tell anyone with ears that he fears the oncoming Saxons and the overwhelming strength of their force. He has no intention other than running as far from it as he can, so long as there is opportunity. In reality, Renskold's objective is exactly the opposite. Practicing his king's highly aggressive approach, as well as that of Swedish military doctrine in general, he has gulled Schulenburg into dancing to his tune, and now intends to meet him in the field on ground of his own choosing. Before Eichstätt arrives to report to Schulenburg in Schlava, or the rear companies of the Saxon army have arrived in the town, rumors are abounding from many directions that the Swedes are not in fact retreating, and are actually readying for battle. Schulenburg, a 44-year-old veteran with 2 decades of service and a keen military mind, realizes he has been hoodwinked, but there is nothing for it. He cannot wait or prevaricate. He must engage the enemy and destroy it. With this in mind, he sets to deploying his army for the following day, the 2nd of February. But another twist takes place that morning that gives Schulenburg some renewed optimism. After viewing the Saxon position at Schlava the previous day, Renskold decided that it was too risky to attack the enemy there, and so has withdrawn again, this time to the direction of Fraustadt. Schulenburg, wary but tenacious, orders his own force to break their strong position and make a pursuit. His confidence returns somewhat when a Saxon dragoon unit falls upon an isolated unit of the Swedish baggage train before dawn and kills its few guards, the wounded, and servants. Their commander then rides back and tells Schulenburg that the Swedes are indeed in retreat all along the line. In fact, the Swedes are a short distance away at Schwetzkau, in battle formation, and hearing the service of their ministers in deep prayer. They are ready and prepared for battle. Once the service is ended, they break into 3 columns and begin the march to engage the enemy. The first of the Saxon-commanded companies to realize what is happening are some Russian units in the village of Neugut, whose pickets spot the approaching Swedes and report back to their commanding officer. There has been much disorder in the village overnight, with some outbreaks of fire, likely a result of the struggle against the cold along with pillage. But 3 warning shots are duly fired from 2 cannons to tell Schulenburg of the imminent attack. The commander, Major General Dunewald, then tries to bring some order to the Russian battalions. Schulenburg's main force is marching through the pass at Ilgen and Neugoth, and forward units are already moving along the village of Fraustadt. He and his main council have decided that they will form their lines in the settlement's vicinity, but there is a disagreement as to where they should fix their defenses. Some of Schulenburg's senior officers advise deployment on a rise to the town's north. There, a large number of windmills, perhaps 30 in all, stand like sentinels, and Schulenburg's commanders say that this high ground, when coupled with the artillery pieces, will afford an impregnable strongpoint. Schulenburg, however, selects a piece of terrain farther east from this ridge, a field still to the north of Fraustadt, and almost close to 1.25 miles wide. Crucially, it is enclosed on both ends by the villages of Rosdorf and Geiersdorf, to the north and south respectively. These hamlets will serve as bastions for the Saxon flanks, with the Landgraben stream south of Geiersdorf and the Rosdorfer forest north of Rosdorf, providing extra defense against what will surely be a ferocious Swedish assault. Schulenburg's captains have reservations about the position. While the walls, ditches, groves, and gardens of the villages and fields will impede the movement of the Swedes, they will similarly impede the movement of the far more numerous Saxon force. In addition, the field is in what is described as a depression rather than raised ground, and this will similarly put the Saxons in a challenging place, both as a target and should they decide to make a counterattack. The firing lines of the artillery will suffer from the lack of elevation. Schulenberg holds firm. Likely he is recalling the rare success he has had against the Swedes at Punitz, where a tight square of Saxons held against the fiery and razor-edged enemy charges. The Saxon infantry is thus placed in between the two villages in 29 battalions, forming effectively 2 rectangles, 3 ranks deep. The Russians form 10 battalions of this number on the left wing on the Rohrsdorf side, with some accounts stating their coats are turned inside out so that they will more closely resemble Saxon soldiers. The Saxon command is worried that the Russian infantry will be targeted as a chink in the army's defense, given the low reputation the Russians have amongst the Western armies. A line of Saxon contingents form outside on the very edge of the Russian flank, sealing the host's far side. Schulenberg's strategy seems not to involve the cavalry in any immediate capacity, so they are placed at the rear, in amongst the buildings and lanes of the villages. Among others, the 1st Cavalry Corps is situated a little south from Geiersdorf, by an iced-over body of water, while the 2nd Corps is to the rear of the Russians at Rohrsdorf. There are also 4 dragoon squadrons in each village, along with 2 extra squadrons of the men known as Fleming's Dragoons in Rohrsdorf. A few sparse infantry units are also placed in the villages as support. Out beyond the main front line, defences are being put together in front of the artillery, which consists of the 2 6-pounder cannon and 2 6-pounder mortars, along with 24 smaller bore models spaced out along the companies. Contrary to modern accounts that state the Saxons and Russians were guarded just by a series of chevaux de frise, the primary frontal defences were actually a series of interlocked wagons, known as Spanish riders, with 24 elongated metal spikes hammered into each of their exteriors as extra anti-personnel devices. The Saxon line thus resembles a horizontal bed of nails interspersed with gun barrels when the first of the Swedes ride into sight. When the Swedes form their lines directly in front of the Saxons, they are arrayed in 6 ranks, with a third of the force consisting of pikemen and cavalry amidst the infantry centre, utilising the customary combined arms fashion of the Northern Kingdom's armies. It is plain to the Saxons also that the centre is mostly infantry, at least to the front where there are 12 infantry battalions. No fewer than 15 cavalry squadrons are behind that again, while the 2 companies either side are mounted troops, 10 dragoon squadrons either side. Schulenberg has made his command position among the windmills on the hill by Geiersdorf, and he looks out on the Swedish line with watchful trepidation. His army's position has been rushed, but he is convinced that they occupy a very strong bulwark, and the numbers against an attacking force certainly favour him. After the fiendish misdirection and subterfuge of the pre-battle manoeuvre and march, he wonders what kind of diabolical tactics Renskold is intending to use in the forthcoming engagement. Using his spyglass to reconnoitre the battlefield's periphery and environs, he waits for the sleight of hand, smoke and mirrors, or even hocus-pocus and chicanery. At that moment, the Swedish drums begin to sound, and the army moves forward. Schulenberg watches as it begins to walk across just a touch more than half a mile to the Saxon positions. Mounted squadrons, infantry and mounted squadrons again. The Swedes and their assorted Confederate nationalities are moving as one. While Schulenberg studies this frontal assault for traps, he sees that the dragoons on the flanks have come further ahead of the infantry, reshaping the Swedish line into a crescent. The high wind blows at their back, and a snow begins to fall. Both good signs for Renskold's companies. Schulenberg is bemused but not surprised. It seems that his opponent has decided on a simple, blunt charge. He cannot see other locations where hidden regiments could spring at any point. Down on the Swedish line, the commanders have noticed that the Saxon front is too compact for them all to attack simultaneously. So Renskold, who has identified that the left flank of the Saxon army is not properly deployed and the dragoon support improperly placed, gives orders that the 10 squadrons on the Swedish right wing branch off from the main host. Under the command of Colonel Detlof von Krassow, they are to attack the village of Rohrsdorf with extreme virulence. At the same moment, Renskold's mounted commander on the left, Major General Alexander Hammerhelm, decides on his own initiative to bypass Geiersdorf, ride around it in an arc, and attack in a flanking assault. By now, the Swedes have passed within 300 paces of the Saxon line, and the order is given to prepare the artillery. The Swedes themselves have foregone heavy guns, following their king's dictum that such weapons are inaccurate and detrimental on the battlefield. 200 paces, and the first Saxon salvo blasts toward the Swedish line. Any discernible gaps created in the line are instantly filled with troops from the rear. Many of the shells explode over the combatants' heads. Their officers roar at them to stay in line. Still, the Swedes march on. 100 paces, and the second volley is fired. This time, some effect is noticed, but again the damage is momentary. Once more, far more of the shells are misses than hits. The line remains solidly walking on. The flanks are beginning to break off toward the villages. The Saxon gunners now frantically attempt to reload their weapons while there is still time. The features and uniforms of the Swedes become clearly visible. All must wait until they can see the whites of the eyes before they fire their muskets, however. Just as the Swedes close those last few yards, the guns fire at almost point-blank range, but still they are pushing forward. Musket fire and smoke fills the air, and suddenly everything is carnage. Schulenberg's view goes to virtually nil. Down on the line, the Swedes are breaking their way through the wagons and the chevaux de frise. The Saxons fire their muskets again and prepare to use bayonets, but the Swedish fighters with their pikes now have an unassailable advantage. Pike do not need to be reloaded, and they have a far longer reach than a musket. Out on the flanks, the Swedes and Confederated dragoons are rushing into the villages, bursting through the shocked emplacements where men have little time to do anything other than fire a single round, and then clear out of the way. Sabres cut them down in their scores. Some Saxon cavalry in Geiersdorf mount a defense, but they are overwhelmed by the more numerous Swedish riders, and soon the entire village is out of their control. Schulenberg, seeing his men running at the sight of the lowered pikes and charging infantry in the center, rides down to try and rally his force, but it is to no avail. There are some Saxon successes against Swedish cavalry in the center, but eventually all of the positions are falling back and abandoning their posts. With horror, Schulenberg sees that Krassow and Hammerhelm's cavalry have now whipped through the villages and are riding back and attacking the rear of the few remaining positions, as well as any of those fleeing the fighting. Krasso's rampaging cavalry catches the retreating Russians, who are now pressed between his riders and the Swedish front-line attackers, led by Renskold in person. The result is a bloodbath. With the Russians eliminated, both Renskold and Krasso redirect their attention back to the center, and the double envelopment is completed. Any of Schulenberg's men still unfortunate enough to be on the battlefield is either killed or taken prisoner. Schulenberg himself manages to escape, despite taking a bullet to the side, but his army is no more. Almost 8,000 of his men have been killed for the price of just 400 Swedes, and the same number again has been captured by Renskold. The fighting itself lasted for barely an hour, and the situation both for Schulenberg and his monarch Augustus has gone from unfortunate to dire. Sweden's place as a European great power and its preeminent military force looks to be assured for eons to come. Don't forget to use my Raid Shadow Legends link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses for new players. Seize the moment. Now is the best time to start playing Raid. If you like what you see, consider supporting my work on Patreon, and you get ad-free early access to my videos for as little as $1. You can also show your support by liking the video, commenting, and subscribing to my channel as a sacrifice to the algorithm. As always, I'll see you in the next one.